All right, thanks for joining us. This is the second in a 4 or 5 part series for insurance billing fundamentals. Just getting folks past the overwhelming or intimidating part about insurance billing. And we say at every turn, the greatest biller we've ever run across in the region was 22 years old with no prior billing experience. So it is awesome to bring a lot of billing experience to the table, but it's also not a requirement. The reason an attorney like me can figure this stuff out is it's rule-driven, regulation-driven, and based on a computer program. And if you just commit to not making any assumptions and reading what's put in front of you from the insurance company, you can do a phenomenal job helping a hospital bill technical denials. So when we think about technical denials in the revenue cycle process, we talked last time about the revenue cycle in general, that it's basically everything that happens to the patient from the time they walk into our front door until the time they pay their bill and the account is paid in full. And every place in the hospital that touches this claim can have an impact on whether or not the claim gets paid and how fast it gets paid. But after we submit the bill, we wait for the payment, and something that's in a technical denial status or where we receive a partial payment is the piece of the puzzle we're working on today. So this section here, we submitted a claim to the payer. They either denied it in full or in part, and they sent us an EOB explaining what's going on. And this is the part of the troubleshooting accounts receivable revenue recognition cycle where we say, what do we do with that remaining balance? What's wrong and how do we fix it? So we say resolving technical denials essentially boils down to, number one, probably the hardest piece is trying to read the EOB and understand what's wrong. And then once we understand what's wrong, piece two is knowing what we have to do to resolve the account balance. Again, most of the information we need is staring at us in the face. You don't have to have 20 years of experience to be an outstanding biller. These are regulations and rules and contracts and agreements, and most of them issue you a manual and tell you exactly what they will and won't pay for and what is and isn't allowed or covered. So the third piece is, if we remember, your supervisor may or may not have talked about the national standard of 50 claims a day. Essentially, that means that your job is based on the supposition nationally that billers can touch, manage, resolve some approximately 50 claims a day, or one claim every 10 minutes. So if you think about that and something's really bugging you, or you're spending too much time on it, or you find yourself on the phone with the insurance company for an hour trying to resolve that problem, just remember that 10-minute shot clock in your head. And before you get into a tailspin, maybe this is too hard of a claim for you, let's put it aside or jot it down on a little note and move on to something that does make sense, so you can touch a lot of claims that you do understand and help get a lot of claims back in the door for the hospital. So we always say, how would I do it? Or if you could wave a magic wand, what would the workflow look like? Or what are best practices as far as working technical denials? And we can work with each of you on an individual basis on workflow and tackling some denials or what it looks like for your specific EMR software. But in general, it seems a little black box for us to take each claim just fresh out of the box and try and understand what's going on with that claim, and then we open up another claim and we start the process all over again. So if I was trying to bill 50 or 60 or 70 claims in this day that I was sitting down to do technical denials, I might spend the first 5 minutes of my day looking at the range of claims that are in there to see if I can spot patterns for, one, stuff I know how to handle, or two, similar amounts. So one facility I was at yesterday had 10 Medicaid denials for the exact same dollar amount. So understanding that the world isn't perfect and we can't always solve a problem in 6.5 minutes, right, to be able to turn around and generate a new claim in time. Those 15 claims for $845 give me an opportunity, because if I can spend some more time and do some more research, I can knock out 15 claims in a row then once I understand what the problem is and how to solve it. So you can look for pairs that make sense, dollar amounts that are patterns, encounter types with denials you've run into in the past. But typically spending about 5 minutes and looking at your stack of denials will help you strategize to where you can make an efficient use out of the list. Secondly, Bob's been great about this, but generally if I have 10 minutes to resolve a claim, you have to think about how long I'm going to spend trying to diagnose and figure out what's going on with the claim. And if you get into it 3 or 4 minutes and it still looks like a foreign language to you, let's think about moving on to the next claim or jotting this one down. So at the end of the day or in 15 minutes before lunch, I can ask that billing lead person and maybe have them help me through a big stack of them. Again, we want to create a stack of them before we're asking questions, because that person also has to get through 50 claims a day. And we want to be respectful of their time. But the theory is if we touch a bunch of them and we start seeing the same pattern, maybe it becomes apparent to us what's wrong, or when billing lead guru shows us how to fix this claim, we can go back and again, we can be efficient at resolving a bunch of claims in short order. And the last thing we do, we use a lot of sports analogies at RHP, but you will find facilities that are geared towards finding that this is an eligibility problem. So kicking it back to the eligibility expert. And then when the eligibility expert finds the problem, they kick it back to the biller. And then the biller takes the info once they read the notes and finally generates a claim. And we say, if it's apparent to you what the problem is, but our only goal is to get the hospital paid, right? So every opportunity we have to just finish the claim, kick it through the goal, drag it across the finish line, whatever analogy you want, that's 10 times more valuable added than kicking the claim around the office, none of which result in the claim getting paid. Another way to think of that is I like to call it death by follow-up. So if you know what the answer is and you can fix it, let's fix it and get it back in front of the insurance company and get paid, instead of looking to get it back to somebody else to research the question just because it happens to be in their expertise or their responsibility for the hospital.
Yes, so I think that Scott, an awesome point along that is to say, look, let's make a note and say, hey, this is the 37th eligibility problem I've had, so we've got a process problem, but I'm going to kick it through the goalpost, and then I'm going to turn that over to my business office manager and let her or him go fix the process problem.
Absolutely. We can make a note so that people get trained, but yet kick the claim forward so the hospital receives the money on the claim. Yeah, really, really good point about what kind of notes you take and fixing the problem while helping somebody get the training needs they have. So at the end of the day, work in technical denials involves dissecting the EOB, either in the information you see in your insurance screen, or if you have to drill down, you get an EOB or explanation of benefits, explanation of payments, And really understanding why the claim got denied is a fundamental piece. That typically takes people the longest time to resolve. And what we're going to try and spend time on for the rest of this course is, how to get on target as quick as possible to understand what's going on with the claim, so then we can use our skills as billers to go ahead and fix it. You remember, so we won't spend too much time on it, this is what a typical EOB looks like. All the patient-related data is here. The ICN, or document control number, is here. And they don't always look the same, but each insurance company, for every correspondence they send us, has a unique document control number, and we'll see why this is important when it comes into fixing claims. But document control number. And then below you'll see line item detail for the charges that we sent the insurance company. And when you download the EOB correctly, you get a line item explanation of what's going on. And then administratively, we find the denials in the adjustment column with an explanation then. So the code number reference here leads us back to the boxes at the bottom of the page. So just as an example of what's going on, here's a claim where we billed them for 2 line items, and they paid us 100% of everything they're going to pay us on this first line item. They didn't pay us $14.20 because our agreement with the insurance company says they get a discount. And CO45 means, hey, we've got a contract here, and this is the amount in excess of that contract. But you'll see they allowed all $14.20 and only wrote off this portion. When you get down to the second line item, though, we billed them $168.90, and they adjusted just a little over $120. And when you look at CO97 as an example, it says we're not going to pay you more than $39 for this claim, because the benefit for this service is included in a payment that we've already made to you for this patient for this data service. So we won't spend too long on it because this is just an example, but the line item and the codes in the adjustment column, another name for these is claim adjustment reason codes, correspond by number to the numbers that are at the bottom of the page. So what do we do once we, if this made explicit sense to us, how do we translate what the problem is? And I said here, if your software or your poster gives you line level detail, you can get to this data without having to even pull an EOB. Pulling an EOB doesn't seem like it takes very long, but if you think about getting out of your chair and walking to a proverbial filing cabinet, or those of us that work remotely don't even have the filing cabinet, that's precious time that we're wasting when we may have the detail in the insurance. So if you're on a Cerner facility, as an example, these posting details are on the insurance transactions tab in the alias section along with the payment, and it'll list the same codes we're looking at here. If you're an SMS site, you'll see some of the high-level adjustments, and we may have to pull the EOB. But if you have to pull the EOB, how do we get our hands on a digital copy as quickly as possible? Now, we say digital copy there because on any website, any Microsoft document, any Adobe document, you can always hit Control F and search, and it makes you that much faster. If Medicare is your biggest payer and your EOB has 70 claims on it, I don't want you wasting time scrolling down through the page looking for the data. So we prefer a digital copy of the claim, and we typically can find those at our clearinghouse, or in the worst case scenario, you've gotten your hands on a paper copy and your business office turns around and digitally scans that up to the network. And we say the last resort is a paper copy if you have to get it. But again, if I only get 10 minutes to solve this problem and it takes me 5 minutes to get out of my chair, I've already eaten into half my time allotted just to get my hands on trying to figure out what the heck's going on with the claim. And the most extreme example we use over here, because a minute here, a minute there doesn't mean much in the scheme of things. We worked with a large facility on the western half of the state of Montana, and they have 4 people responsible for $24 million. So they don't waste a second. They don't waste a click because their accounts receivable in good shape, and they can't spend the time on it, right? Everything's engineered, always important to look for where's that next place I can save 3 or 4 minutes. So the other thing that's a helpful resource is this from Washington Publishing Company. This used to be anarchy for the insurance companies, and they recognize that if everybody followed different rules, it would be physically impossible to get through. So an industry trade group came together and decided on what's supposed to be an industry standard. And a great tool for a biller working technical denials is this claim adjustment reason code website, because if we got, as an example, a denial that said CO50, we would learn very fast that it says these are non-covered services because that's not deemed medically necessary. So that fast I already know why they've denied the claim, and I can focus all my efforts on figuring out if they're right and what I need to do to fix that. So this is a good tool for a biller to have, and we recommend that you keep it in your favorites. Most importantly, we'll go through.
Scott, you're finding that you go back and forth. You look at the code, you look on the website, you come back and say, okay, now I know what my next action is. Is that a true statement?
Yep. Whatever you've got to do to understand that denial code, that's step 1 in fixing the denial process is, okay, they don't agree it's medically necessary. Now what do I do in the face of a medical necessity denial? And your office or your supervisor or your RHP cheat sheet will walk you through what the step is once you understand why it's denied. But the first key is translating these denials and really gaining an understanding of what the heck did they object to on the claim. We'll look at it in a minute. Sometimes they're not always right? And we have to appeal it, and we send notes and whatnot, but it all starts with whether you call them, whether you do a research on that code set, whether you consult payer claims processing manuals, or whether you get on the phone and you call the insurance company and say, explain it to me like I'm 2. What they deny then leads us to how we're going to go about fixing it. We'll look at it just briefly, but we've developed a list because what we kept telling people is, holy cow, here's the ANSI denial code and here's what it means, and it still wasn't registering for people. So we've started training new billers just based on this grid format that says, here's the code, here's the description, and practically here's what you do with it. So as an example, if this one got denied, we send in a claim for $100. If you get this denial, they'll deny all $100. And it says this may be covered by another payer in coordination of benefits. Well, to those of us that have been doing it a while, that makes explicit sense, right? But if you're a new biller, that might be great, but now what do I do? So we've developed this chart, and then we'll send it out after this presentation, but it says, hey, congratulations, that's an active policy for Bob Lopp, but somebody else's primary insurance. So that coordination of benefits means the relationship between the primary and the secondary biller. So what do I do then? I understand this isn't who I should have sent the claim to. You've got to go back to your Verify eligibility software and gain an understanding of what's the proper benefit order, and then resubmit the claim to the primary insurance company. So we've got tool sets. Your supervisor might have tool sets, whatever it takes to get you to a path forward on here's how we're going to go about fixing the claim. We hopped out of it somewhere. So if I was here, we'll just jump back into it because I don't know what I did. But I want to caution you against relying too much on your sticky notes or the handbook from the 30-year experienced biller, because just to make things interesting, some payers like EBMS or VA don't actually follow the ANSI standards. So the industry got together and said, here's a list of standard denials, and they've said, well, that's great, but I'm not using it, just to make your life difficult. So ultimately, we can give you some tool sets to build your confidence, but at the end of the day, you just got to read that claim and understand what they're objecting to. Because, like I say here, ultimately, they'll change the codes on you, and so then the cheat sheet doesn't mean anything. So what are good resources for understanding technical denials? There's a great industry publication called the UB Editor, or if you have Medicare billing responsibility, there's one that looks a lot like this called the Medicare Guide. It's binder format or electronic, and we said if you don't have it, ask your supervisor to order it because it's that good. Some of them will have it there and nobody ever trains them on how to use it, and we can walk you through why that's one of the greatest books you'll ever own. But that is a detailed, what it means is the insurance form, you'll remember from last time, is the UB04, and this is called the UB04 Editor, and it's just a detailed guide of what's every allowable charge for a type of bill, how does that correspond to revenue codes that may or may not get on the claim. And it also regurgitates some of the data that we looked at last time from the Noridian Quick Reference Guide on occurrence codes and value codes. Some of the more forward-thinking facilities have CodeCorrect.com. It's a great resource, but it's expensive. On CodeCorrect, you can get detailed information on specific CPT codes, which is current procedural terminology, or the specific line item reference for what happened to the patient. And then you can search for Medicare challenges or what do they always object to with respect to this CPT code. You can look for diagnoses that support medical necessity or don't. But again, it's a pricey resource. One of the most underutilized resources I think you have, and depending on where you're located, we'll send you links to these things. One of the most underutilized resources I think are out there are the specific payers claims processing manual. And Medicaid in both Montana and Wyoming have outstanding ones. We had an example the other day where a facility got denied because they said we sent them too many claim lines. And that's just nonsense to me. We've been doing this a long time, and neither Bob or I had heard of it. And in 30 seconds, we pulled up the Medicare claims processing manual, and it says, yeah, you should never send me a claim with more than 40 line items. And it was right there in the text of the claims processing manual. So there's a wealth of information you can use, or, you know, when your billing lead has a spare minute, they may have seen these and they can give you a shortcut. But there's some great resources, and we'll link to all of these on the Rural Health Partners website. But all of it's focused on how can I, as fast as a nuclear missile, get into understanding what's going on with this claim. So I can get to the second part, which is now what do I do? So your claim's been denied, now what? And it's this easy, and it's not this easy, but I'm a pretty simple-minded redneck. So if you think about the world in terms of I can either fix it, appeal it, or adjust it, those are the only three outcomes. And again, we don't mean to trivialize this because there's a great level of complexity in insurance billing. But sometimes if you think about it in simplified terms, it takes some of the mystery out of it, and it makes this process a little less intimidating. So we say fix it. In this situation, the claim that got to the insurance company wasn't our best effort. There was either an error on it, maybe our coders put the wrong diagnosis on it, or there was a typo and somebody picked the wrong CPT code that didn't actually match what happened for the patient, or there was a transmission error. Sometimes we can send claims to Medicare. We had a facility where it was dropping. So when I looked at the claim in-house, it had the total charges added up. But when it got to Medicare, those total charges were missing, and that's a pretty important line item. Whatever reason, that claim that got to the insurance company wasn't our best effort. And in that case, we can fix it. And the issue is just, do we send them a replacement claim, or are they a narrow scope of payers like Medicaid and some of your Blue Crosses that require an adjustment form? 8 times out of 10, you can just send in a replacement claim, and we'll show you how to do that. But there are a handful of payers out there that need an adjustment form. So, and you want to have a good feel for who those are. We tell you the most obvious ones as an example: Medicaid, Blue Cross. There's also a scenario where Medicare is the easiest claim to fix. But if they paid us on 9 out of 10 line items and they denied one line item, we may have to send in a reconsideration form because the DDE process doesn't understand what to do when we send in and try to fix that claim. So it's beyond the scope of this class tonight, but 9 times out of 10 we'll be able to send in a replacement claim, and we'll show you how to do that just a couple pages down. But understand where we have the opportunity to send in an adjustment form. Blue Cross Wyoming is a great example because in Wyoming they give you a website sort of like DDE, and you can log in and make corrections on the face of the claim. The last thing we should talk about is, let's make sure the second time a claim goes out the door, are we sending them another one that ends in 1? 9 times out of 10, your presumption should be that it's a 7 or a replacement claim. And if you're wondering what the heck I'm talking about, remember the type of bill schematic. The first bill digit indicates where it was at. The second digit indicates what type of service. And the third bit, or as we call it, the fourth digit, relates to what claim number is it in the frequency. So we sent a claim out the door for $100 for PIATS lab visit, and there was something that we need to fix on there. The first time that lab bill went out the door, it was on an 851. When we send them the replacement claim, that claim now is going to have an 857. And we'll show you a picture of the UB so you remember what we're talking about. But the last thing that dictates this is the only place you'll hear the common working file is for Medicare billers, but it's an important concept to understand because it impacts how we look at the claims that go back in front of us. My first year as a biller, I put out a publication that just told everybody, gosh dang it, you need to be sending claims out with 7s on it, and here's how you do it and do that properly. But if you think about a denial where we sent Mike's claim to Cigna sent it right back to us and say, this isn't one of our insureds. So the insurance number was wrong, or we didn't spell his name right and they didn't recognize us. That thing has never gotten through the front door. If the insurance company is a big house, it's never gotten through the front door. So if we fix his claim number, we find his insurance ID, and I couldn't read it, and I put an 8 instead of a 5, and we send that back to the insurance company, that's going to have a new original claim form because that last one we sent them was nonsense. They didn't understand it, didn't know what to do with it, and it didn't go against what their equivalent of a common working file or Mike's manila folder or his little part of the network. So there are some times when that first one was garbage that it's okay to send a new adjusted or a new claim that's going to look like an original claim form. But your presumption should be an XX7 unless we have reasons to believe otherwise. So the second scenario is that the claim was correct, but the payer, we think, reached a wrong or an equitable result. And so we have to appeal it. Now, some insurance companies like Cigna, the appeals process is easy as we have our provider call one of their providers. They don't want to mess around with appeal claims forms, and they want to put the medical experts in touch with each other. And sometimes they will overrule the decision. These typically look like a disagreement over what was required for the patient or why something, I hate to use the term medically necessary because most of the time medical necessity is very formulaic. They have a list of codes that have to line up with the diagnosis. Does everybody know what we mean when we say medical necessity? So, yes. Okay, yep.
But I got an explanation would be good.
So if we think of Medicare as trying to protect your tax money, and if we think about the 80s and 90s for healthcare, people were billing Medicare for everything they could, and Medicare was just writing a fat check for it. And even Congress can figure out that thing's not sustainable. So they have developed a list for what they say meets medical necessity. The example I always use is if you were diagnosed with a broken toe, but we were submitting a bill for a chest x-ray, that diagnosis doesn't line up with the procedure code. And so they deny the claim and say, this doesn't meet medical necessity. We think you're trying to scam us, and we're not going to pay you for it. But if you have another, like a clinical process where the doc thought a course of meds was required that the insurance company doesn't pay for, or they disagreed with using a bariatric bed versus a regular bed, sometimes you can put the appellate division in contact with our provider or our utilization review committee. Other times, there's just a simple appeal form. If it's medical necessity and we substituted a new diagnosis code, our coders went back through the claim form and they found a diagnosis that really works. There's just a form that we send in. And what we say here is one way you can maximize your appeal efficiency is if you've got a new coder and we're sending a lot of these appeal forms in, again, back to the 10-minute shot clock in your head. How do I do that efficiently if I've got to send in a lot of claim forms? One, to Bob's point, we want to make a note of how many of these the coders may be pooching and what we can do to get them more education. But secondly, if I save that appeal form all filled out with all of the explanation that I needed, then if I had 10 of these to fill out, I could just change the name, change the claim specifics, and hit print again, right? So the year I was first starting out in billing, I had 7 or 8 of these saved. One was for medical necessity, one was for typographical error, one was for, and so look to use the software to take as much of the non-value-added time out of it to get you back into processing more claims and getting this off to the insurance company as soon as possible. There's a third scenario here, and we hate it because it doesn't result in any more money for the hospital, but sometimes it's appropriate. So the payer's absolutely correct. They denied it. We've brought it back to our internal experts, or we just know in the case of medical necessity, we're required to get a form in order to bill the patient for it, and we didn't get that form. There is nothing else to do. So it's sitting in our system as a denied status. And it's just because the provider put us in a bad spot, or we ordered a test they really didn't need, or that's not covered and there's nobody else we can bill for it. The third resolution to these denials is to build a list of adjustments, right? And for
so
your
Scott, would ABN issues be an example of something that would fit there? We didn't get the form signed, so we're out of luck.
Yep. So exactly right. So the answer to medical necessity is a form called the Advanced Beneficiary Notice, or ABN. And the reason they call it advanced is because you have to have the signature on the page before the test is run. And you can whine all you want or complain it ain't fair. If you didn't have that form signed, then it's all over but the crying. And we will never, ever get that money back, and we can never, ever bill that patient for the services. So the only thing for us to do is learn a little something, maybe go chew somebody's butt on the clinical side, but this, we're not going to get any more money out of it. And every time we waste time on a claim we're not going to get paid on, we could be out there spending time and effort and energy on something that really will generate. So we're big fans of saying the truth will set you free. And if it really needs an adjustment, then let's not mess around and sit on the adjustment just because it's unfortunate. So some folks have a set amount that billers are automatically allowed to write off. Other hospitals have an adjustment form that you fill out and take to a supervisor, because you don't want the newest biller on the block writing everything off, and maybe they're not aware of a cool trick or a new rule. So sometimes your facility will require an adjustment form. But if this is one of those categories, let's just tee it up and get rid of it so we never ever have to look at it again. I spent a lot of time rambling. This is a good time to take a break. We've got about 15 minutes left. Questions, value added, move on. Okay. I think the rest of this will go pretty
good.
I think the rest of this will go pretty quick. We've got, as you'd imagine, I'm a visual guy and I love cheat sheets. So we've got a separate cheat sheet we'll send you on generating adjusted claims. You'll remember this was the type of claim where, what did I do with it? There's a problem on it, we can fix it, and the payer doesn't have an adjustment form. We just send a replacement claim. One thing, Cerner, as an example, will give you an opportunity to send a late charge only claim. You don't ever want to send something with a 5. I'll bet you $100 you can't find a scenario where this is appropriate. So avoid the 5 with the plague. You always want it to end in a 7, and we'll send you this out after the tips and traps on adjusted claims. But the 4 keys to successfully adjusting a claim are the type of bill that we spent so much time on. FL18 tells the big dumb computer at the insurance company what's going on. If you look at all the boxes on this claim form, there's a lot of things that can change. And in FL18, there's 10 digits for different reasons that we're fixing this claim. And so you've got to have a number in there, and you can find that number on some of those links we gave you for the Noridian Quick Reference Billing Guide. The third piece is the document control number. You'll remember we spent a little time on that, and I told you I'd see why it was important. What we want to, if you spoon feed the insurance company with all the data they need, they can pay us as quick as possible if we get a turnaround and fixed rate, And one of the things that does that is the document control number from the denial. So they sent us a claim, they denied it and say it was part of a bundled procedure, and we say, no, we just forgot to include a modifier. So when you send in the adjusted claim, it's critical that you have that document control number, because they pull up their last objection, they see that, yes, you fixed it with a modifier, and everybody's drinking boat drinks because they sent us a check. And the last thing you want to do, down at the bottom left-hand corner of the claim form is the remarks box, and it's no bigger than like a Twitter feed. It's not very, but as succinctly and as specifically as possible, if you can fill in the remarks section, you'll increase your success rate and payment rate on claims by a factor of 10 if you put remarks in there. And so what are we talking about? If we added a modifier to the charge on line 5, I would say added 25 modifier to CPT code 99286 on line 5. Please reconsider. It just makes them laser focused. For the insurance companies that are get there with a computer, if you have these 3 boxes solved, they're going to solve the problem on their own. But the remarks field is, if something gets flagged or they're not as sophisticated and somebody actually has to pull the claim and look at what we're asking for approval for, we want to make it as easy as possible for them to write the check. And so the fourth thing to do there is the remarks button or box at the bottom left-hand part of the claim. So we tell you all of that, and then you look at a 1500, and all of that type of bill, document control number stuff goes out the window. There's a box here, FL22, that would contain a resubmission code, and it's got a spot for an original reference number. But if you drill down to the payer claims manuals, most payers, Medicare, Medicaid, Blue Cross, Cigna, they don't even use that box. There's a document called an implementation guide that literally tells you the rules for every one of these spaces, and the box for FL22 is blank. So the way, 9 times out of 10, the way you fix a 1500 is just by simply in another 1500 with the corrected details. So it's 8:50 and we've saved time for questions, but in conclusion, be on the lookout. This is the nuts and bolts of how to process claims. But how we drive value for the facility is be on the lookout for, if you have to fix every emergency room procedure that went through there, because we're dropping both a technical charge and then a charge for sewing somebody up. That's a process for us to work backwards and solve at the source. So you don't have to spend all your time fixing all these denials, right? Ultimately, we want to dry up the source of the denial at the spigot. And so keep your eyes open for, gosh dang it, every time doctor staff works on Tuesdays, I get slammed 30 days later with a bunch of denials because he's dropping too many charges. So in addition to being a good technical denier biller, look for opportunities to solve the problem at the source, either with a billing rule. Can we code that second technical procedure with a modifier so we don't have to fix it and add a modifier and send the claim back in? Or is there a process that the doc needs to follow? Is there a process that the doc needs to follow so we're not dropping that extra charge or our coder's missing the modifier? So it's great to be a good technical denial technician. This is where we raise our level of value to the facility. Again, like I said, just be opportunistic, save appeal and adjustment forms by reason so they're easier to replicate, because that shot clock is important. The difference, one of the 10 differences between a good biller and an amazing biller means we're fully productive. And your facility is either measuring your productivity or they need to be. So at some point, you and your supervisor are going to talk about how efficiently you work through these claims. But just that notion that one claim every 10 minutes means we have to be efficient at working denials. Don't spend too much on it. Find ones that you understand and seek help on the ones you don't so you can get through that on a timely basis. And I don't think this is rocket science, but I'm firmly committed to the notion of an hour for these classes. So let's stop there. Do you folks have questions? And if you don't have questions, we'll send you copies of A, the PowerPoint, and B, the cheat sheets we refer to after this is over.
Scott, this is really good. I think it's a powerful point about not getting wrapped around the wheel and spending 45 minutes working on a claim that's worth $45, but knocking the one. We have so many claims to process that we've got to knock, cut wood on the ones that we can get through efficiently, and then get better with training and with help from our billing lead or business office manager. I love that message.
You bet. The rule is you don't have to have years of experience to be a biller, but it may take 20 years to understand every derivation. And then 20 years from now, you can bet that the rules are changed. So even those people with 20 years of experience. So we'll use those ones you don't understand to show you how to research or to exhibit for you what's going on. And you'll just build your capacity. But in the meantime, you don't get mired down in stuff. And then you're not as productive. And like Bob says, let's chop wood on the ones that we know how to do and we can generate back and get some cash in the door.
Thanks. Any other questions, you guys?
No questions from my end. Just wanted to say that it's highly educational and highly appreciated.
I agree. I don't have any questions either.
So good.
Thanks,
folks.
Scott.
Appreciate your time tonight.